Here we are with my main man, Dr. Russell Kennedy, who's joining me at Rewire, and we are going to expand on this conversation.
Yeah.
And Russ and I are here in Whistler, and I just asked my community this question. I said, "What challenges are you facing with sexuality?"
Mm.
And this woman, this dear member of our community, shared something that I thought was so powerful and so relevant. I've heard it so much from many women that are dating or married to men who are, into pornography, fantasy, that kind of thing. So I decided this would be a good time for us to talk about the neuroscience of uh, sexuality and connection and relationship dynamics. So I'm going to ask the question here.
Yeah, sure.
So this is what she said. And she said, I said, "So what challenges are you facing with sexuality?" She said, "Competing with porn and unrealistic expectations from men obsessed with it. I love sex and sexual intimacy. To me, it's one of the most beautiful things you can share with someone. For me, it involves a deep emotional connection, something of myself I'm only willing to share if I feel that deep connection and love. But for the most part, I've attracted only men who seek the excitement of the sex, not true intimacy, and hold no true value to its meaning, and by no means suggest I give myself away freely. Quite the opposite. I have very strong boundaries and beliefs, but for some reason seem to constantly attract evil narcissistic men who completely lie about their intentions and deceive in the most horrible of ways. And once they have conquered that side of me, discard me like I was nothing." So I asked her permission if I
Okay.
could go in and help her with some blind spots. She said, "Yes, please." So
Okay.
she was open. And I told her I wanted to do a video. So where do you begin to unpack this one, Dr. Russ?
I think it's realizing that men are very visual. So porn for men is has much more of a draw than porn for women. Porn for women, from what I understand and what I've read, is a lot more reading about it. Going into your mind, like processing it. Which
50
is
Shades of Grey.
yeah, yeah,
50 Shades of Grey
yeah,
is porn for women,
absolutely,
and the
yeah.
dominant, submissive kind of that kind of thing. And so men are more visual, women are kind of emotional and
They're more relational. I think. Men are really we're raised to not actually be that connected. We're raised to be in a competition with other men.
yeah.
There is this sense you can't cry, you can't be emotional. So the energy's got to go somewhere.
And we use pornography to self-soothe. This is the first thing that I
Right.
want to. The reason why we're here, first of all, I do want to give a disclaimer. We're not victim blaming. We're not blaming this on women. We're not saying that it's okay to to use
Good.
pornography. We're not justifying it. We're not making women at fault. I just want
But
to
we're
give
not saying it's not okay either. Like I think there is a use of pornography that is, sometimes in a couple relationships,
you
spice
can
things
use it
up.
consciously.
Exactly. But I guess we're talking about the men that unconsciously kind of addicted, going back. And I think just about every man has been addicted to porn at one point in their
At some,
life.
I mean, first and foremost, how many women have I seen in my DMs really suffering because of this? And
Mm,
they caught their men using pornography. They
right.
know that the man does, and they're like, how do I compete? So the word compete, there's this word of competition.
Right.
And so what we want to do is to dispel the shame and have a mature conversation. We're going to be talking about this deeper at Rewire in the VIP kind of container there, but I just wanted to introduce it. And the first thing is that most men that we know, we've been
Yeah.
part of men's groups, many men's groups. We lead men's groups now. Do you want to know what the number one problem is? Their
Women.
sexuality. Yeah, women. Yeah, they have
No,
just like
we're
women have the
victim
problem with,
blaming. Yeah.
or just
Yeah.
like women have
Yeah.
problem with men.
For sure.
When we're supporting men and when we are receiving support, the conversation almost always begins with men who are doing men's work, is we're working on kind of like uncoupling from our need or pornography, because listen, pornography doesn't reject you.
No, it's easy.
It's
Yeah.
easy. There's no way. It's like in this
Yeah.
society where we have fantasies and like we're shamed for them.
Yeah.
If our partner isn't into what we want, then all of a sudden, what are we going to do? We're going to go and try to find it in other places where we're kind of cloaked in secrecy, silence, and shame.
Yeah. So if you like naked circumcised goats on rooftops with nuns, you can
How are you going to
find
bring
that.
that
Like,
up? How
and
are you going to
how
bring that
it's
up
like
with your woman?
yeah, honey, this nun's outfit. Could you put that on? Well, okay. I brought this goat. There's this goat, and could we go upstairs for just
Could we?
So that's one of the things. Is like how do you as a male feel comfortable saying this is a fetish that I have, or
Right.
this is a one of my little
Fantasy.
this is one of my little kinks. If that's if that
Yeah.
this is one of my fantasies. Like how do you bring that out without, because if you're already rejecting him for porn,
Yes.
he's not going to feel comfortable
Safe.
telling you about the goats and the rooftops and the nuts. He's not. You like that one?
Why do we have to go to such an extreme?
No, well, I did
we
it.
know.
I did
we
it for
know
a purpose. I
we
did it
know
for a
whose
purpose.
kink-
Yes, we
Whose
did it for a
kink is
purpose.
that's all about?
Where can I get a good goat in this town? Can anyone direct me to a good goat at a monastery, please? I'm just saying that I think we men have this sort of fantasy life that we live out in this porn thing, and it becomes a very separate. So this is when it comes back to the competition thing. It's not a competition because you, as our partner, we see you as a sexual being in this realm. We see porn completely different. It's like it's not like we're blending you together and going, oh geez, this is my wife's not like this or whatever. She's not like the nun and the goat.
Sometimes it does.
Well,
Sometimes it does. Okay, like
okay.
it happens both ways.
Yeah.
This happens both
Okay, I
ways. The
agree.
first thing that I want to tell you is this: is that in order for us to heal and for the genders to stop fighting against one another and playing victim to one another, the first thing we have to kind of go back in history, and I think maybe close to 100% of boys play with their penises.
Oh,
Like I have a 3-year, he's almost 3 in the recording of this. He doesn't stop touching his penis, right? And so I remember when I was younger, touching my penis. When I remember, I think I had memories when I was 5, 6 years old, where it felt good and I didn't know what it was about. And
right.
it wasn't really sexualized because you don't have
No.
this concept of sexuality. It just felt really good.
Yeah.
And it felt soothing to my nervous system. It's a form of self-soothing. So playing, masturbation. And then all of a sudden, my mother catches me, and that causes a massive activation within her because of her religious background. And she's now making it mean that she's a bad mother and her
Right.
son is going to hell. So what's her nervous system doing? She'll react to me. And then what does my young nervous system receive is this experience of, oh shit, it's bad to play with myself. In other words, if I want to do it, I have to do it in secrecy, in silence, and in shame. And so in that moment, what happens with every child, especially with pornography, is they get this pleasure, maybe orgasm, coupled with shame and secrecy. So what happens is when he knows that you're dead against it and you cause this to feel rejected, what that's going to do is that, or you threaten him about it, or he knows how much it hurts you because you haven't done your own kind of inner process on
Not that it's all about you.
Not that it's your fault,
yeah.
but it's bringing up rejection from you. It's bringing up blind spots of rejection, maybe being betrayed from your past. Maybe you was even seeing your parents kind of having infidelity, or it happened with your father. Anyway, you're bringing your story into it.
And it's taking him back to a place where he's 4, 5, 6, 8, 12 years old. His mother's found it porn magazines
because of shame
or whatever. And there's that deep shame that was never really talked about or resolved, because now what they're doing with kids is like, that's okay to touch that area of your body, but it's a private thing. So if you're going to do it, it's okay, but just be in your room by yourself,
right.
Or, be in a place where, it's okay, but it's not something that we, sort of share with people overtly.
So what happens exactly? So what happens is when you become reactive to catching him with pornography and you lay the smack down, what you're doing is you're kind of reenacting the trauma.
Or you withdraw. Like
you're,
that's
you're,
the
you're
any
reenacting
Yeah.
you're reenacting the trauma, and there's three options for him. Number one is to, oh my God, I'm so sorry, and submit to your emotions, which you're not going to feel great about him doing that. There's no way you feel safe when a man submits to your demands, even though on the surface level you want him to. Deep down, when he doesn't have a backbone like that, and he's not able to kind of like lay his ground for himself and understand himself because of his shame, that causes even further disrespect. That's the first one. The second one is it could cause him to withdraw even further, and maybe you as well.
Yeah, so it just becomes this reciprocating, self-propagating cycle of shame, withdrawal, either attack or withdrawal. And the whole thing is it's a separation. It's a break in that connection. So the men that I see overcoming porn or using it very infrequently or whatever, develop this emotional connection with their partner. Like, hey, we're a team here. I know this bothers you. It's not that I'm comparing you to this. It's just when I was younger and I was bullied at school, when my dad was freaking out, or when something wasn't going well, here was a place that I could go as a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old, and porn is ubiquitous now. As a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old, that provided me with some relief, some safety, some pleasure. And now that safety and pleasure is hooked into shame and guilt. And there is this kind of thing in our sexuality and the neurological wiring of our sexuality. Shame is in there. It's just a matter of how much, how negative is it, and how pervasive does it affect your body?
Yeah. And then it'll get coupled. The more that you shame him for it or react, it actually gets coupled with thrill. Yeah. So what you're doing is you're going to drive the behavior further with your reactivity. Now, notice I'm not making it about you, or I'm not blaming you as the woman. I'm not blaming you for it. I'm just saying this is a conversation about healing. We're trying to get understanding. The only way this can heal, and the people in our kind of offerings and trainings that I help, kind of we uncouple the shame by having the conversation and looking inward. What's this bringing up for me? So the invitation here for every woman is, what's this bringing up for me? What am I making his kind of fantasy, his kind of self-soothing behaviors that he's been adopting since he was a child, and he's been shamed for it and wants to hide because of his own shame.
Right.
What are you making that mean about you? And how
is he picking up on that negative energy, which of course makes him off balance, which of course drives him back into porn.
Or he'll get defensive and escalate.
Yeah.
He'll get defensive and escalate and deny because he hasn't done his inner work and is using that. So,
or use it as a weapon. It's like, okay, like passive aggressive. It's like, I know she doesn't like this. I'm mad at her. So I'm going to go in my room.
I'm going to go and I'm going to go. Exactly. And so
I'm glad you agree with
this isn't to justify the behavior. We're trying to understand it. And what we all want, we want the same thing. We want healthy, secure relationships where there's healthy sexuality channeled within a partnership or whatever arrangement.
Like a team. So you feel like you are together. Like,
yes.
I will help you with this porn thing.
Yes.
I will join you with this. It's like, it's something that I'm not crazy about, but it's something we can work on together instead of the polarity. Because as soon as you get the polarity, it's going to drive him deeper into it. It may drive him deeper into it, which of course creates more separation, which of course drives him deeper into it, or drives more separation. Those are 1 and 2. So what was the third one? The first one is that
he'll submit.
He'll
submit and say, okay, I'll do whatever you want to do. Which then you're not going to respect the guy who does that.
Right.
He's not going to respect himself. And now it's like an alcoholic. It's like,
what's your crutch?
It's his crutch. Like
you use.
How are you going to? It's like an alcoholic telling you, I promise you I won't drink again.
Yeah.
do you really feel safe with that?
Right.
You're gonna have to sleep with one eye open the whole time.
So that's one.
You haven't addressed the real issue. Number two is he's gonna withdraw further.
The shame and the thrill thing get locked together.
Is going to get locked together, the shame and the thrill, just like when he was a kid with his mother.
Yeah.
So he's going to do it in secrecy,
Yeah.
and you're still going to have
There's
the
a
same
charge
problem.
to it.
There's
definitely a charge
there's
to
an
it.
emotional charge to it. Or the third one, he'll get defensive, and then he'll escalate, and he'll say, "Fuck you! I'm gonna do it just to piss you off."
Actively or passive aggressively too.
Yeah.
Like knowing that, if he leaves the bed at 11 p.m., you're like, oh, okay, I kind of know what's going on
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
So women know, they have an intuition. It's like, okay, this isn't quite right, but you don't know exactly how to overcome it. So we're saying, can you join with them? Can
Yeah.
you say, look, I understand this is an issue for you. I understand it's not personal to me. I understand that it's something you probably used since you were a teenager to soothe you. So can we come together on this?
Yeah.
I would like to be able to be a teammate in this rather than your oppressor or your demander.
Yeah, rather than your opponent.
Yeah.
Right. And so, okay, so Russ raises a very important point. The problem with that is, unless a person does their own inner work process, they can't really get to that. Who would a woman have to become in order for her to be able to say, hey, I understand what's going on. I'm seeing this. How can we work together? That type of a person has to take responsibility, not blame. This is what we teach in our Cycle Breakers programs is, all right, what's this bringing up for you? The first option is just get angry and don't do any work, blame him, play the victim, and then hope that the next person that you're with doesn't have this problem. But we're talking about an epidemic. Pornography is free.
Oh yeah.
There's a reason for it. I have my theories. Pornography is free. Alcohol, like all of these, like video games and pornography, it's an unconscious attempt to weaken men, to break down the family system, family unit, and raise children that are easier to control. This is my theory.
Government overlord.
This is my theory. Easier to control, so that the family unit is fucked beyond recognition. And we have men that are emasculated. We have women who have to take up the slack because the men are so weak. They got to take up all this slack and then carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. And they don't want to. Many of them do. Woohoo, way to go. But many of them don't. And they want to, they're tired of having the weight of the world on their shoulders, and they want their men to step up and lead within the relationship.
Yeah, there's a biological dynamic for men to want to lead, and
biological and instinctual.
Yeah. So, and if your woman is kind of taking that away from you for whatever reason, consciously or unconsciously,
through awareness, wounding,
and awareness is really key with this sort of thing. So it is emasculating again. So again, there's a risk to your interaction with your wife, with your partner, because she could reject you. Whereas porn, video games, golf to some extent, although golf can reject us.
Golf, golf is very rejecting.
So this biological imperative that we have is being kind of changed now. So women and men are more, there's less polarity and there's more equality, which is great on some levels, but it also confuses both men and women, because we're like, okay, well, I like it when you take some control, but it doesn't feel right to me. Like the interaction isn't
there's
right.
a lack of polarity within a conscious relationship. Most relationships, because of this dynamic, become depolarized, and then you end up feeling like roommates. And there's no erotic tension amongst you. You don't have a desire. Sexless marriages are like 1 in 4. Pornography is a big part of it. Of course, this conversation is really about healing and kind of like bridging the divide between the sexes. We really want to have men and women working together
as a team
on this, and that can only happen through understanding. So so the first option is just get angry, stay wounded, not look at yourself and only point the finger and go, oh, he's hurting me, rather than really looking and seeing it. And option 2 is to, regardless of what he's doing, if he's not willing to work with you, you're not ready to move on, then start the journey of understanding what this is bringing up for you. Does this does this kind of bring up some childhood stuff for you? Because is this an invitation to look at parts of you you haven't loved, that you're taking this so personally as an attack on you when it actually is him and his own
I think
kind of
that's a huge
self-soothing?
point, that it's about, our relationship to pornography is something we've had since we've been 12, 13, 14 years old, sometimes even earlier these days with the
Internet.
yeah, the internet. So it's kind of like, this is a different relationship. Like, I think that's where the competition part comes in.
Yeah.
Like, we hold these two things very separately in our minds. So it's not like we're blending them together. It's like,
It's like
oh,
he's cheating on me with,
yeah.
he's cheating on me with pornography.
And I think that's a really good point, because that's not really what's happening. A lot of times men are stressed. They don't really know where to go. We've been conditioned since we were boys not to express our feelings. So the energy's got to go somewhere. So pornography, video games, UFC, all this kind of stuff is basically this distraction, this socially acceptable distraction
Mhm.
that men go into because it's easier than actually dealing with your feelings.
That's right. It's a way to numb, just the same way that you use alcohol, the same way that you use like romance novels, or it's
Shopping, whatever.
fantasy.
Yeah.
Like we all have it. It's just the meaning that we make out of it. And so
Right.
this is what we want to offer. And at the Rewire, the VIP kind of container, Russ and I are going to kind of put together a little training on for women who are dealing with this, especially how they can cope with the anxiety that this brings up within them, so that they can now show up as more like, if your partner is on board, like have them watch this. you know we'd love to educate more men. Like we would love it. And that's one of the challenges, is getting men to be able to do.
Huge challenge.
It's a
Getting
huge
men
challenge.
to
Believe me, we would love to just work exclusively with men and help them with this stuff. It's just challenging for us to look at ourselves.
You think men are resistant to, dealing with you? Dealing with other men, like being in a men's group, is amazing, because for the first time you're actually in a group of men that are there for you instead of against
competing.
you, instead of competing
Like
with you.
we're in trouble and we need other men, but the biggest obstacle is that we're scared to look at ourselves. We think that it's weak.
Right.
So we would love to support other men, and the best way that men can wake up is when this is what I've observed in the men that I've worked with, is that they come to me when their woman finally does enough inner work that they say, I'm just not going to participate anymore. And that means getting over your anxious attachment and stopping abandoning your heart and elevating your self-worth to know that I deserve better than this. And so that takes some inner work to do. So when you're willing to do that, your part, and then and be willing to move on, that just might be the wake-up call that your man needs in order to do his work. So
when you reflect something differently, if you stop reflecting the shame and the blame and the judgment and the fear that comes from inside of you with your own competition, like, what was competition like for you? Like, did you feel you were in competition with a sister or with your mother or whatever? Because it's the same feeling. The pornography is bringing up an old wound in you.
Yeah.
Not saying that it's okay in general, but it usually brings up some sort of old wound. So
Who
if we can
doesn't
find
have a
that
story about it?
if we can find that little girl in you and go, hey, this isn't personal to you.
Yeah.
This is more to do with him than you. And how can you find that little girl, see her, love her, protect her, and care for her and love her to the point where when you're grounded within yourself, he doesn't feel that, oh, I'm being rejected. It's like
you don't
you're gonna be
regress
there
into
for him.
you don't regress into the child. You become kind of the queen that you are and deserve to be. And that's really about empowerment, rather than feeling victimized, and rather than staying in that victim role. And I want to end with this one piece, okay? Because we do have to go. Where she says, the most part, I've attracted only men who seek the excitement of sex, not true intimacy, and hold no true value to its meaning, and by no means suggest I give myself away freely. Quite the opposite. Red flag, a little bit of a red flag, I gotta say, red flag here. I have very strong boundaries and beliefs, but for some reason seem to constantly attract evil narcissistic men who completely lie about their intentions and deceive in the most horrible of ways. And once they have conquered that side of me, in other words, had sex with me, discard me like I was nothing. So this is where we'd like to address potentially some blind spots.
Yeah, and I think there's one of the things about our neurological wiring is that we don't see these patterns. And
It's not conscious.
yeah, Gordon Neufeld talks about this with kids on the playground. It's like kids that are getting bullied or shamed or hurt. It's they seem to kind of gravitate towards the same. Like Neufeld watches these children and says, you know, you would think that they would kind of move away from this thing, but they kind of gravitate to it. And I think this brings back this whole concept of Freud's repetition compulsion. What was normal for you in childhood, you will unconsciously replicate in your adulthood. Now, this is not victim shaming. This is or victim blaming. This is an actual neurological concept where what we equate what is familiar in childhood. So if you had abuse, abandonment, loss, rejection, having to grow up to
abandonment again and again, betrayal, a feeling of having the rug pulled out from you.
You will unconsciously reproduce that in your adulthood. Now, some theories is that we do that because we want to heal it. I'm more of a scientific thing. I think it's just something that gets wired into us. So I see people like I had this woman in my
But there is
practice.
an opportunity to heal it.
There, of course there is.
It is something we
if
do.
you have awareness.
If you if you've learned the
If
tools,
you choose to see it.
if you've learned the tools, when you attract it again, like I had this one client, we'll talk about this, one client, and we were working through this. She was raped 5 times with different partners.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
She had this experience with her partners. She was like, it happened 5 times. And so it was in our group trainings, it was a very heart opening call.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I got her consent to go back, and it turned out she was sexually abused by her father.
Yeah.
So as a child, she hardwired in sexual abuse
with familiarity
with her dad, because her dad was so physically abusive. The only time that he was ever connected to her was when he was having sex with her. And so what happens neurologically in that case?
Well, we fuse, we merge that particular sensation, that unconscious, and this isn't conscious. You know, this is not blaming.
Victim blaming. This is no one's fault.
It's a combination of the blind spot. So she probably wouldn't see men who were, you know, sexual predators. There's a blind spot there because for her father, she would have to explain to herself, this is okay. This is, you know, he's not a bad person. He loves me, whatever. So we create these blind spots. Now, this is a huge, you know, charged issue because of sex, and we're not in any way victim blaming. All we are saying is that when you have a certain thing that happens to you in childhood,
it gets coupled.
It gets wired into you, and you sort of stumble into it over and over again because of that blind spot.
And it's not conscious, so you don't see yourself doing it.
And you know, so if there's something that happens to you over and over, and I say this to my anxiety people all the time, it's like, what was normal for you in your childhood, and how are you unconsciously, like looking back, replicating that same kind of structure in your adulthood, and then saying, oh, you know, this is someone else's fault. This is you know, this is someone else's problem. If something happens to you 3, 4, 5 times, just really, again, not victim blaming, like look at, okay, what is happening, and how is that reminiscent of my childhood?
How old do I feel right now?
And that's a big one.
How old do I feel right now? Yeah, that's a whole nother video. We're going to be talking about this at Rewire and in our actually healing, love, sex, and money conditioning. I'm doing a series of master classes. We're going into this in masterclass number 2, healing with sexuality and infidelity, because this is a big topic. We just wanted to just drop.
So to wrap this up. So yeah, we've been trying to do this for a while. We got to go golfing again.
Yeah, okay.
So to wrap this up, what would you say to a woman whose husband, boyfriend, whatever, has an issue with porn, and what would be 3 steps she could take
and
right now?
If she keeps attracting the same type of evil narcissistic men, that she's like, oh, I'm blameless. I don't
know if she was saying that, but at some level,
she's not doing it consciously. She truly wants a connection. But one thing I do want to say, especially if you really want a connection, when you let a guy in and penetrate you emotionally, sexually, without a commitment first, there's a possibility of getting hurt. There's a possibility of getting hurt, and this is coming from a player in recovery, right? So and so if you're constantly, this isn't your fault, but if you're constantly coming into the exact same issue, then there's a blind spot. This is something that you would definitely get some great help with understanding these childhood dynamics. You ask yourself, how old do I feel? You know, what am I making this mean about me? How old do I feel? And now start to
Start
journal.
to find that, and find that 8-year-old, find that 12-year-old, find her inside of you, and start a conversation with her. She may not answer right away because she's been hidden for a long time, but make that connection, because it's not overtly about him and his porn.
Mhm.
It's really about something that's keyed up inside of you, this fear of abandonment, this fear of
A
sexuality, or
younger
whatever.
part that was really hurt that you've unconsciously discarded.
And
So it,
turned into, I don't mean, I need to interrupt you. This is really important. We talked about this morning, is that when you regress back to that 8-year-old who saw her father having an affair with another woman, when you regress back to the same emotional structure as that 8-year-old. So of course you're going to be irrational. Of course you're not going to have the wherewithal to be able to handle this difficult situation between you and your partner, because you've turned into an 8-year-old.
you're both 8.
Yeah. So when you connect with that 8-year-old and you bring that 8-year-old into present day belonging, you can bring all of you into this situation with your husband, boyfriend, and porn.
And through dissolving the shame and learning how to be with it, you can actually break that cycle, because it didn't start with you, but it can definitely end with you. So that's what we wanted to share. Thank you for the question. If you want to hear more, this week, I'm beginning my 4-week masterclass series in the Healing Love, Sex, and Money Conditioning Facebook group. Go ahead and join in, and make sure you show up to the calls and get all the dates, because we really want to help people break these cycles from self-abandonment. It all starts with self-abandonment. We discard ourselves. We judge, abandon, blame, and shame ourselves.
Yeah.
This is Dr. Russ's JABS kind of acronym that he came up with that's been super helpful. And we just want to teach people how to heal with themselves, repair with themselves, and have secure relationships and juicy polarity on the other side of secure relationships. You deserve it. It's not your fault. It's in your conditioning, and we can undo it. See you at the next perfect time. What do you want to say?
That's good. I think it was great. Thank you so much.